in some ways, we could have recorded the last couple of weather briefings and played at least large portions of them again today. But the bottom line is we have more of the same, and the dryness in general will continue. Although there are signs of at least a temporary change coming up within the next week. And actually, we can talk a little bit about precipitation, which we haven't been able to do much this growing season. I'll get to that in a second. On the our leadoff image here today, this is the most recent U.S. drought monitor for the lower 40. Well, actually for the U.S. But you can see that Michigan things are changing rapidly here. And I looked up on the 13th of May, as recently as the 13th of May, there was no drought certainly in Michigan or really nowhere in the region. And now that has expanded rapidly. And you can see all of the lower peninsula in either D0 or D1, abnormally dry or moderate drought, including about 40% of the state now in the D1 moderate. And so the index is playing some catch up. What we're dealing with is a flash drought situation here. We're just a very, very rapidly transitioning period of time with regard to moisture. I'll talk more about that in a second, but things have changed rapidly in the last couple of weeks. For the past week itself, one of the interesting aspects here of this very, very dry period has at least recently it has been cooler than normal, and our mean temperature departures for the week reflect that, from 3 to 6 degrees below the normal for the week. A lot of that was overnight with some cool, a lot of minimum temperatures in the 40s, and it kept our averages down for the week. And just as importantly, especially for those areas that are experiencing moisture stress or increasing levels of moisture stress, those cool nights do offer some at least temporary relief from moisture demand. On the right-hand side, though, again, the major story for much of the state, precipitation totals for the week ranging from, in some cases, actually more than 3/4 of an inch. You can see a lot of northern Michigan, the Upper Peninsula in particular, and the southeastern lower. We're both very fortunate in that regard and picked up some convection. Some areas got more than an inch, but they are by far the exception rather than the rule. And as you can see here from the map, large portions of central and southern lower, less than 1/4 of an inch. Once again, some cases there was very little or no precipitation. Again, in some central areas of the state, and that just again especially for so many consecutive weeks, is obviously not a positive thing. I put an accumulated precipitation chart here together from Grand Rapids. It's representative of certainly much of central and southern lower peninsula, the lower peninsula here, back to the beginning of October, sort of our hydrological year. And the green line here is accumulated daily precipitation. The brown is the normal. And again, this is just to essentially illustrate where we are and how rapidly things change. And one of the differences between this year and some of the previous really impactful drought situations, and the big ones are of course 1988 and 2012. Those are the top of the list. But a major difference between those years and this year's was that in both 88 and in 2012, we came into the growing season following an abnormally dry winter and early spring. That was not the case this year, and you can see that here at Grand Rapids, and it wasn't everywhere, but most spots you can see heavier, greater than normal precipitation fell during the late winter and early spring, especially from late February through March into the beginning of April. But since the first week of April, and that's really where everything changed in terms of the upper air, and we dried off, and that's where you see this discontinuity here on the left side of the highlighted area. And since the 5th of April, only at Grand Rapids, only a little over 2 inches of rain total. Normal is just shy of 10 inches for that period. That's about just a little shy of 10 weeks, so about 75 days. But what you can see here too, really clearly, is there's just no slope to the line. It's essentially no accumulation at all. And so for that approximately 10-week period, a little less than 8 inches of precipitation below normal, and just as importantly, at the bottom here, our potential evapotranspiration rate. That's the reference value, again indicating atmospheric demand over 10.5 inches. So collectively, all these things together just points at rapidly depleting soil moisture, especially in the top of the soil profile. But the caveat, the key difference this year versus, again, some of those other really, really bad drought years was there still is moisture at depth. And that now it's depleting, dwindling as we speak, reserves, but you can clearly see that in vegetation where you have the roots to extract water at depth. There's not nearly as much stress as there is for shallow rooted or annual crops. All those that don't have the roots are really feeling the effects. But again, if the roots are down there, there's still water there at this point in time. So a couple current drought indices, and this isn't a surprise. On the left is the short-term objective drought blend from the National Drought Mitigation Center. And important to note that Michigan really is part of a much larger area across much of the U.S., the Corn Belt here in particular, where we've seen rapidly changing conditions. Almost very, very similar situation to what I just showed at Grand Rapids. On the right-hand side is one that we don't look at as often, at least not early in the year. We do later, the Vegetation Drought Response Index, and this is a combined surface and satellite derived index, which indicates how much water stress there is for vegetation. And I think what's interesting about this one is, yes, we're seeing some browns in here, including some darker browns, indicating more significant moisture stress here, but it's soil specific. So the coarse textured, well-drained soils are really, really having issues keeping up with water demand. But back to what I just said about the rooting depth, that it's not everywhere. We don't have large areas here in brown, and it from place to place where roots are deep enough, they can still extract water right now. And so if you look at trees and shrubs and other vegetation that does have the roots, it's going to show up eventually if the trend continues, but it hasn't been nearly as bad as it has been for the topsoil layers. And degree day totals here, with a cooler than normal week, most of the state is pretty close to the climatological normal relative to our seasonal base 50 accumulations. Southeastern parts of the state actually a couple days behind. And then as you go north and west from there, a few days ahead. So we're not very, very far away from long-term climatological normals. And I think that's probably been a positive thing here, at least in the last couple of weeks, where we did not have the extreme temperatures that we saw a little earlier in the growing season. As far as the forecast is concerned, well, it's more of the same. This morning on the map, we've got a low pressure system in the Tennessee Valley to our south. It's been there for the last couple of days. It's associated with an upper air block, which is, once again is locked in across the Midwest, with high pressure to our north. And that's again, Michigan here, just no way moisture can get here physically from sources to bring it into the upper Midwest. That's been one of the problems we've had for the last several weeks. And as we look here to tomorrow morning, it looks very, very similar, and even into Thursday morning, it's about the same. Now, that said, after Thursday, things change just a bit, and we may see some of the moisture associated with this particular system migrate up into at least south or southeastern parts of the state on Friday and Saturday. So at least for that part of the state, we will see some, at least a chance for some scattered showers Friday and Saturday. But after that, and I'll show you the map here in just a moment, there are some changes suggested for early next week. And that's what you see here is a weather map for early Monday morning, and the upper air map here on the upper air forecast here on the left-hand side. That is a trough. It's actually moving. It's moving towards us, and that certainly, it's a source of lift. And it also means we're going to, at least temporarily, we're going to be able to bring some moisture up at low levels, which has been very, very very, very unusual this year. And on the right-hand side here, these are forecast 6-hour precipitation totals. So after, again, a chance southern parts of the state on Friday and Saturday, we will see at least the beginning threat in the far northern part of the state or northwestern part of the state by Sunday afternoon, and then continuing overnight into Monday and maybe even Tuesday. This system here, the upper air system and a low pressure system on the surface, will combine to provide maybe the best chance for rainfall we've had, at least in a couple weeks. That's all in all, that's cross our fingers. That's the next chance we see of anything really significant for most of the state. And for precipitation totals potential here for the upcoming week, you can see most of the state at a half an inch. The vast majority of what you see here will be that system beginning of next week, Monday and Tuesday. After that, there's a chance of another system late next week. So again, maybe a little bit better chances or more opportunities for rainfall than we have seen certainly over the last couple of weeks. But important to note, this is not going to end this situation, the dryness, the lack of water, but it's certainly a start, and it would be a big help. And at least on a temporary basis, we will see a little bit of hope. Now, temperature wise, we will be going back up to above normal temperature levels here for the next several days, mid to upper 80s generally for highs today, tomorrow, and on Thursday. Lows generally in the 50s because of the low humidities. We just drop off at night. A little bit cooler on Friday and Saturday, upper 70s to low 80s, and then back up to the mid and upper 80s once again by early next week. So if we look at the week collectively, it's going to probably average out to a few degrees above normal or warmer than normal, especially given the next few days. So again, more of the same in the short term, but some hope for some precip here in the beginning of the weekend, and then more importantly, early next week. Medium range forecast guidance, and it's been a long time since we've seen this. If you look at the jet stream pattern here, there is some change or some movement here from the pattern that we've been stuck in. Trough moves a little bit further out west into the Pacific. You can see the troughing that's been typically over north or eastern parts of North America has shifted more towards the Great Lakes region, but we still have a signal for warmer than normal temperatures here. That's associated with this ridge that's over the middle of the country. But here's the one that we haven't seen, and that is it's actually the medium range is suggesting above normal precipitation totals here. This would be for the very end of June, the first few days of July, and that's been a long time since we've seen something like that. So again, at least a temporary change here expected in the next 1 to 2 weeks, and it would certainly be greater chances for precipitation than what we have seen. Finally, looking at the new long lead outlooks that were issued last Thursday by the Climate Prediction Center, both the outlook for July, which is on the top panel, and then the 3-month July through September, the seasonal outlook, both of those still call for above normal or warmer than normal mean temperatures for those periods. There were, though, changes in precipitation. They're not positive, but they call for the equal chances scenario here during the month of July, which is interesting given what you just saw with the medium range, both the 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day outlooks calling for normal to above normal precip totals. But here, officially for July, you can see no forecast direction. But the one change that we did see for the seasonal outlook, you can see they did move to a drier than normal outlook. It had actually been for some time, it had actually been calling for above normal precipitation totals. That has changed. The reason you might want to ask why, well, some of it is actually the large area of the Midwest that has dried out in dry landscapes, and then that feedback, that there's actually a feedback loop in the atmosphere that would tend to lead to more dry weather after you've developed this large area. So that's of course not good. There are also some statistical guidance tools that suggested drier than normal. So that's a change that is not positive, but it's certainly worth noting. So wrapping up here again, more of the same in the short term. Warm, dry, sunny days, highs in the 80s, and we will certainly be looking at elevated levels of at least evaporative demand. Not that there's water there to evaporate, but if there were, it would be above normal. But the big news then, chance for some rainfall, scattered rain. It won't be anything really heavy, but at least a chance on Friday and Saturday across southern parts of the state, especially the southeast. And then a better chance comes late in the weekend, late Sunday into Monday for the rest of the state. And again, I think that's the best chance for rain we've had in a couple of weeks. And lastly, medium range, maybe a little bit of a hint of more frequent chances for precip as we move into the beginning of July, and maybe a little bit beyond that. So I'll stop there and see if anyone has any questions. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the report.
Sure.
In the last round, it seemed like we got some hailstorm associated with the rainfall. Is there any way of predicting if that's coming in with the next round of moisture?
Yeah, and I guess the good news on we did see some severe weather. It was primarily confined to the far southeastern corner of the state. And some of it had to do with the synoptic situation at the time. But right now, it's difficult to say in advance. But right now, based on what we see, this would not be a situation that you would have an elevated risk of severe weather. So at this point, I would say no. But the system on certainly on Monday, it bears watching. Anytime this time of the year, it happens. But at this point, right now, based on the guidance, it doesn't look like some kind of a large outbreak or anything like that. So I would say probably not. But as always, we'll know it'll be more apparent as that early next week approaches.
No question, just a comment, because we were talking a couple weeks ago about how the U.S. Drought Monitor didn't seem to be caught up with what we were seeing, and it seems like they caught up very quickly.
And they're well, as you can imagine, they're still working on this, and the circles that I'm a part of at some point. There's a lot of interesting discussion from the states in the Midwest about how this is happening. But again, I think this has just been such a rapidly transitioning situation. It's hard to keep up with a product like that. But this is almost literally the definition of flash drought, and what we see so rapid. We move from one extreme almost to the other, literally with just in a few weeks. It doesn't happen that often, but it definitely happened this year.
Jeff, I have a question too. With the weather patterns, is El Nino happening right now? I think you said, right?
Yes. And I didn't, that is a part of our long lead outlook. We are officially now an El Nino event began. Remember, we had been in La Nina for 3 years prior to that. That went back to neutral here this spring, and officially in May, warmer than normal sea surface temperatures in parts of the equatorial Eastern Pacific. We're in now. What's now is a weak event, but it is forecast. The guidance suggests that it will become at least moderate. It may be a strong event, a strong El Nino by later this year. But I think the most important thing is right now, and the reason I didn't mention it, it probably will have very little impact on our weather here, at least for the next few months. Probably not for the summer. It likely will, though, especially if it's a strong event. It will likely have, though, impact late in the year and over the upcoming winter. And you probably remember the key correlation typically is a mild and dry winter in the upper Midwest with an El Nino. But that's a long way off. So yes, we do have El Nino, but probably no direct no direct connection or impact at this point, at least not in the short term.
Okay, I was wondering, that answers my question too, kind of the long term. Have you seen and I know weather patterns have been changing, but have you seen where you have drier springs, you tend to have wetter late summers, wetter falls? Is there any, I know you don't have a crystal ball.
No, and you can run the statistics on that, and it's the statistics are pretty noisy, so it's really difficult. So where we've been is not that the lag correlation here is really low, so it's difficult. But with El Nino and La Nina, there certainly there's statistical links there, but not necessarily if the spring is really dry like it was this year. It doesn't say much. We can't say much about what follows. It's a uniform distribution. So it's a part of having our weather and climate in the mid latitudes and just all of the noise that's there. It's just can't pick up much of a signal.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.